What if a 14-year-old girl walked into the headquarters of a billion-dollar tech company and calmly asked them to say one forgotten name? This isn't just a story about engines or blueprints. It's about legacy courage and the quiet power of a daughter who refused to let the past be buried. Before we begin, if stories like this move you, stories of resilience, hope, and second chances, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling the ones that matter most. Now, let's begin. Poor mechanic's daughter was dared to fix the engine. What she said made the CEO turn pale. The lights above the NovaVolt presentation hall flickered to full brilliance, casting a silvery sheen over the rows of suited executives, camera crews, and restless engineering students. The air buzzed with anticipation. This wasn't just any launch, it was the launch. NovaVolt's new prototype, the Helix 1, promised to revolutionize electric engine performance. Whispers of patent-breaking breakthroughs and design innovation swirled through the audience like wildfire. At the very center of the grand stage, the Helix 1 sat atop a polished glass pedestal, sleek and motionless. Towering LED screens behind it displayed blueprints, simulations, and bold slogans, "The future is now." Victor Lang, NovaVolt's CEO, strode on stage exuding confidence in his bespoke charcoal gray suit. He paused, let the applause rise and fall, then raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deep and practiced, "you're about to witness what 10 years of brilliant sweat and relentless vision can do. The Helix 1 isn't just an engine, it's the pulse of tomorrow." He pressed a button. At first, the machine responded exactly as expected. A low hum vibrated through the hall, quickly rising into a smooth, futuristic purr. On screen, torque stats and energy readouts danced in perfect rhythm. Applause erupted. Victor beamed. Then, without warning, the hum choked. The sound stuttered. One of the display metrics plummeted. The engine's core light, once a steady blue, flickered red. Victor's smile tightened. Behind him, the screens glitched. The engine gave a sharp mechanical clank, loud, metallic, ugly. The room stilled. Then, quietly, the Helix 1 went silent. Victor pivoted. "Reboot diagnostics," he whispered into his mic. A cluster of engineers in matching black NovaVolt jackets rushed the stage tablets in hand. They prodded, whispered, tapped. Nothing. A nervous cough broke the silence from somewhere near the front row. Victor forced a grin. Sometimes the future likes to take a coffee break. A few scattered chuckles, mostly polite. He turned again to the engineers. "How long?" One of them hesitated. "We're not sure, sir. It's an internal loop failure. It doesn't match any fault in the system." Victor's nostrils flared. "Get it running." In the third row, a group of high school students in bright green STEM Club t-shirts shifted in their seats. Among them sat a girl with soft brown curls pulled into a ponytail and a notebook clutched tight against her chest. Emily Miller, 14 years old, sat ramrod straight eyes locked on the engine. She wasn't just watching, she was listening. To everyone else, the failure was mechanical. To Emily, it was familiar. The hum, the choke, the double-click delay before shutdown. Her fingers gripped the edge of her seat. That was her father's flaw, the one he spent 3 years fixing in the garage before NovaVolt fired him. Her breath caught. Could it be? On stage, Victor turned to the audience. His eyes scanned the rows, then landed on the students. An idea sparked in his gaze. "Oh, come on," he said, letting out a theatrical sigh. "We have the next generation of engineers with us today. Maybe one of them can show us where us old folks went wrong." Laughter followed, but it was tinged with tension. He pointed. "You, the one in the ponytail." Emily blinked. "Me." Victor grinned. "Yes, you. You're in robotics club, right? Think you can fix the machine." A few people laughed louder, relieved to have a distraction. A joke. Surely he didn't expect. But Emily was already rising. Her teacher, Mr. Harris, reached out. "Emily, you don't have to." She moved past him with quiet purpose notebook still clutched in her hand. Her heart pounded. Her legs felt like stilts. But her mind, it was sharp-focused, slicing through every memory of her father's late-night sketches and tool-smeared diagrams. The audience murmured as she climbed the stage steps. Victor raised an eyebrow, now unsure if this had been a good idea. Emily approached the engine. It stood tall, silent, and stubborn. A young engineer handed her a tablet, smirking. "Here's the diagnostics. Good luck." She didn't touch it. Instead, Emily stepped closer to the machine itself, placed her ear just above the coil housing, and closed her eyes. It was faint, but still there, the double tap in the capacitor feedback loop, the one her dad called the heartbeat glitch. Her hand moved to the access panel. "Can I open it?" she asked. Victor hesitated, then waved. "Sure, impress us." She pulled a small multi-tool from her pocket, one her father gave her on her 7th birthday, and began to unscrew the cover. With the panel off, a soft light bathed her face. Her eyes scanned the wiring. There it was. A loop rerouted in a way she'd seen once before. Not just similar, identical to her father's fix from 10 years ago. She adjusted 3 lines, rewired a tiny connection, then closed the panel. "Try it now," she said, stepping back. The technician pressed the button. The hum returned. Smooth, steady, stronger than before. Applause erupted, real, surprised, explosive. Victor stared at her. "What? How did you do that?" Emily turned to him, clutching her notebook to her chest. She didn't yell. She didn't smile. She simply said in a calm, clear voice that rang through the room, "Because I watched my dad draw this exact engine when I was 4, before you fired him." The room fell utterly silent. Victor Lang's face drained of color. A camera zoomed in. The girl from nowhere. The daughter of the man Novavolt erased. And now she had just restarted their future. The applause had long since faded, yet its echoes clung to the corners of Emily's mind like ghosts. She walked stiffly down the backstage corridor, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. A staff member tried to speak to her, something about press or the CEO requesting a word, but she barely heard him. Her fingers still trembled around the frayed leather binding of her father's old notebook. Mr. Harris caught up with her, his face a mixture of pride and alarm. "Emily, that was good, Lord, that was something. But do you realize what you just did out there?" She turned to him, her voice quieter than before. "I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because—" They were pretending it was new. He paused, studying her. "That engine. You think it's the same design?" Emily opened the notebook to a page near the back, yellowed, wrinkled, and smudged with grease. The diagram there, hand-drawn in ink and pencil, was unmistakable. The core loop, the routing system, even the capacitor housing it was all there. Her father's writing curled around the edges like whispered thoughts. "Check third wire crossover. Coil needs isolation." Mr. Harris exhaled. "Jacob Miller." She nodded. "My dad." He glanced around the empty hallway before lowering his voice. "Emily, your father was a legend in the garage back then. Some said he had the best mind Novavolt never used. And when they let him go, the rumor was he'd tried to file a patent, but it got buried." Emily's eyes flickered. Buried, rejected, lost, misfiled, pick your word. All I know is a few months after he was fired, a new name showed up on Novavolt's breakthrough designs. Not his. They stood in silence. She closed the notebook gently, the binding soft from age, the pages worn from being held too tightly for too many nights. She had kept it hidden under her mattress for years, reading it like scripture, listening to the echo of her father's voice as she traced his sketches with her fingertips. He used to tell her that engines were like people. If you didn't listen to them, really listen, they'd break down. Emily was 4 when her father stopped smiling. She could still remember the day the letter came. Her father stood in the kitchen holding the envelope from Novavolt while the toaster ticked and the radio hummed low. Emily had been coloring on the floor using old blueprints he gave her as scrap paper. When he read the letter, his shoulders didn't slump. He just froze, as if someone had unplugged the power to his soul. They told him he had violated protocol, shared internal concepts, jeopardized company trust. But Jacob Miller wasn't a thief. He was a builder, a fixer, a dreamer with oil-stained hands and a heart too soft for boardrooms. After that day, everything changed. The garage became his world, not out of bitterness, but because it was the only place that still made sense. He spent hours there hunched over the same blueprint Emily had just shown to the world. She used to sit next to him on a crate, legs swinging, asking him why wires needed jackets, why volts couldn't be seen. And he always answered. He taught her more in that dusty garage than she would ever learn in a classroom. But money got tight. His tools grew rusty. The engine he'd been building from scratch, his masterpiece, remained unfinished. Her mother, practical and increasingly impatient, worked double shifts at the diner and pleaded with him to let it go and get a real job. Jacob refused. Then came the accident. A collapsing scaffold on a night shift at a construction site. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd taken the job quietly, hoping to save enough money to buy a single part for his engine, the same part that had just lit up the stage at NovaVolt 10 years later. Emily was 7 when they buried him. She hadn't spoken at the funeral. She just placed a small wrench beside the coffin one with his initials carved into the handle. Since then, the notebook became her compass. She read it late at night under covers, taught herself how to solder wires and rebuild old toaster motors. Her mother disapproved, said she was chasing a ghost. But Emily couldn't stop. She wasn't trying to prove her father right. She just wanted the world to know he had existed, that he mattered. And now, Victor Lang, the same man who smiled from magazine covers, who spoke of innovation like he invented it, had just watched her breathe life into the machine he claimed to create. Her pulse quickened. Not with anger, with clarity. There was a reckoning coming. Mr. Harris broke the silence. "You need to be careful, Emily. This isn't just about a broken engine anymore. This is legacy. Corporate patents. They don't play nice when there's $1 billion on the line." "I'm not afraid," she said, her eyes steady. "They buried him once. I won't let them do it again." Mr. Harris looked at her the way a father might, half fear, half awe. "Then you're going to need allies." "And proof." Emily nodded slowly. "I have the notebook. You're going to need more." She tightened her grip on the worn leather binding. "Then I'll find it." She turned back toward the exit, stepping into the gray-blue light of the evening. Behind her, the hum of the engine still echoed faintly through the walls, her father's hum. The world just didn't know it yet. But they would. The garage still smelled like him. It had been 7 years, but somehow the air still carried a faint blend of motor oil, rusted steel, and lemon hand soap, her father's favorite. Emily stood just inside the doorway, her fingers grazing the light switch before deciding not to turn it on. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows over the concrete floor. That felt right. Like memory itself was bleeding through the walls. The workbench was covered in dust now, save for a few old bolts and a cracked voltmeter. Cobwebs clung to the corners. The engine block her father had worked on his masterpiece sat frozen mid-build, half covered by an old tarp. Emily walked toward it slowly, her shoes crunching over tiny fragments of metal and time. She reached for the tarp, paused, then pulled it back. There it was. A block of history and heartbreak, unfinished and mute, but not forgotten. Her fingers traced the initials etched in the corner of the housing, J.M. rough and shallow, scratched by hand. She closed her eyes and saw him there, sitting on the rolling stool, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm, gesturing with a socket wrench as he explained thermal conversion like it was a bedtime story. "See this," he once said, tapping the capacitor coil. "It's the brain." But that he pointed to the feedback loop, that's the soul. If you don't listen to it, you'll never hear what it's trying to say. Emily smiled even as tears burned at the edges of her vision. That day in the NovaVolt hall had awakened something. Not just in her, but in the truth itself. A truth that had been packed away, buried deep, and left to rust like this engine. She pulled a milk crate toward the bench and sat down. From her backpack, she took out the notebook and laid it gently beside the motor. Page after page of sketches, annotations, formulae, each one a breadcrumb back to the man the world had forgotten. Back when he died, her mother had taken every blueprint, every model, every scrap of his work and boxed it all up. Said it was time to move on. But Emily had kept this one notebook hidden under her bed. She knew it by heart. Still, she flipped through it now with careful hands, eyes scanning, mind turning. There. Page 47. The capacitor loop sequence identical to the one she'd seen inside the Helix 1. A decade ago, her father had written in the margins, "If they don't believe it works, let the hum convince them." That hum. It had filled the NovaVolt stage like a ghost's whisper come home. She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures of the most critical pages. Then she stood, walked to the corner cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. It groaned, unused for years. Inside were his tools carefully placed in a velvet-lined box. But beneath them, wrapped in an old cloth diaper, was something else. A manila envelope. Her breath caught. She pulled it out. Across the front in bold black marker were the words, "Patent Submission, 2015. Unsent, her hands trembled. She peeled it open and slid the contents onto the bench. A full set of technical drawing schematics, and a letter addressed to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It was never mailed. She checked the envelope again. No stamp, no postmark. But everything else was intact. At the bottom of the letter was a signature Jacob Miller and a date March 12, 2015. She covered her mouth with one hand, the other tightening around the page. He had tried. He'd believed in it. He had built it, refined it, documented it. But for some reason, in the chaos of being fired, humiliated and overwhelmed, he never sent it. Or maybe he wasn't allowed to. She flipped through the drawings again. They were cleaner than the ones in the notebook, more polished, detailed, final. This was proof. She heard footsteps behind her and tensed. "It's getting late, Emily." Her mother's voice, calm, but tired. "I know," Emily said, not turning. Her mom stepped inside, arms crossed, looking at the garage like it was a wound she'd tried to let scab over years ago. "I thought I told you not to come out here anymore." "I needed to," Emily replied quietly. "I found the submission draft." Silence. Her mother walked over, glanced at the yellowed pages. Her face didn't change, but something in her posture softened. "He never sent it," she said. "I told him not to. I was scared." Emily turned surprised. "You stopped him." "I begged him to wait," her mother whispered. I thought if he just laid low, maybe they'd call him back. Maybe the company would fix it quietly. But he wouldn't stop talking about proving them wrong. He kept saying the truth mattered." Her voice cracked. "I was just trying to protect him. Protect us. And then he died." Emily stepped closer. "You were just trying to survive." Her mother nodded slowly, eyes shining. "And you're trying to make it right." A long silence stretched between them two women, two eras, two kinds of grief. Then Emily said, "This isn't just about Dad anymore. They're using his design, and no one knows." Her mother looked away. "What if they come after you?" "Then I'll tell the truth," Emily said, her voice steady. "I'll do what he couldn't, what he never got the chance to." Another pause. Then her mother reached down, picked up the envelope, and pressed it into Emily's hands. "Then, you better do it right." That night, under the faint flicker of the garage's single working light, Emily scanned every page into her laptop. She uploaded the images to an encrypted folder, labeled them, and copied them to a flash drive she slipped into the locket around her neck. Tomorrow, she would show Mr. Harris. And after that, NovaVolt. The past wasn't just a story anymore. It was evidence. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt it. Not just grief. Not just anger. Power. The kind her father always said came not from machines, but from standing by the truth. The morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting thin gold lines across Emily's bedroom floor. She sat at her desk, fingers still curled around the flash drive in her palm like it was some kind of holy relic. She hadn't slept much. After scanning the documents from the garage, her mind had raced through the night memories of her father's voice, the hum of his prototype, and the stunned silence that followed her words on the Nova Volt stage. Now, the world outside moved on, unaware that something irreversible had shifted. Her mother knocked softly, then pushed the door open with a steaming mug of coffee. "You didn't sleep," she said gently, setting the cup down. Emily shook her head. "Couldn't." Her mother glanced at the notebook and laptop still open on the desk. "What are you going to do next?" Emily hesitated. "Mr. Harris. He's the only one who believed me. I think he can help." Her mother gave a soft nod, then tucked a strand of hair behind Emily's ear like she used to when Emily was little. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let the fight make you forget why you started." Emily looked up. To make them remember him? No. Her mother smiled. To make them see him. At school, Mr. Harris was waiting in the workshop classroom, the faint smell of solder and burned wire lingering in the air. The walls were lined with half-finished student projects, tiny robots, circuit boards, gear assemblies. But it was Emily's arrival that pulled his attention. He stood the moment she walked in. "You brought something," he said. Emily nodded and handed him the flash drive. He plugged it into his laptop and scrolled in silence. His eyebrows slowly lifted as the schematics loaded page after page of meticulous designs, timestamps, calculations, clear evidence that someone had built the Helix One years before it ever hit a Nova Volt lab. When he reached the cover letter to the USPTO, Jacob Miller's name and the unsent date, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled hard. "Emily," he said, voice low, "this isn't just technical similarity. This is original authorship. I know. These alone could open an inquiry. Especially with what you did on stage. They won't listen to a teenager." "They might," Mr. Harris replied, "if it's a teenager with a teacher who used to work at NovaVolt and knows exactly who was in charge of R&D back in 2015. Emily's eyes widened. "You were there?" He nodded. "Only for a few years. Your father trained me when I was fresh out of college. He was the real deal, passionate, brilliant too, honest for his own good. When he disappeared from the design team, none of us were told why. They just said he broke protocol. No one asked questions. And I've regretted that for a long time." Emily swallowed hard. "Do you think Victor Lang knew I'd bet my pension on it?" A knock at the door interrupted them. A student aide handed Mr. Harris an envelope marked with the Nova Volt seal. Emily's heart jumped. He tore it open. His brows furrowed as he read. Then he looked up slowly. "They've invited me and you to attend a follow-up demonstration. Today, noon sharp." Emily's stomach tightened. Me. Why, they're calling it a community appreciation gesture. But I think it's damage control. She stared at the floor. "They're going to try and spin it," probably Harris said. "But it's also your chance to be in the room. And if you're ready, we can make sure they can't ignore you again." Nova Volt's campus glimmered like a glass cathedral against the noon sun. The main lobby was buzzing with guests, journalists, influencers, local STEM students, community leaders. Everyone was smiling, sipping complimentary cold brews, staring at the futuristic engine in the center like it was a sculpture. Emily walked beside Mr. Harris, her father's notebook tucked inside her backpack, the flash drive in her pocket. A tall woman in a blue blazer greeted them. "Thank you for coming, Miss Miller. Mr. Harris. The CEO will be speaking shortly." Emily recognized the woman from news articles. Claire Renner, NovaVolt's head of public relations. Every move she made seemed rehearsed like a chess player halfway through a very long game. "Please, this way," she said with a smile, too perfect. They were ushered into the demonstration hall again, same stage, same engine, same CEO. But the atmosphere had changed. There was tension beneath the polished surface. Victor Lang stood at the podium charismatic as ever, but with a new edge in his voice. "We're grateful for the community's enthusiasm," he began, "and for the incredible young talent that continues to inspire innovation here at Nova Volt. Today, we're proud to present a restored demonstration of the Helix One, now updated and fully operational." Applause. Emily sat in the front row, eyes locked on the engine. Lang continued, "And we're especially honored to welcome back Emily Miller, whose curiosity and initiative reminded us all why the future lies in the hands of the next generation." More applause. Emily blinked. Curiosity, initiative. He was turning her truth into a soundbite. As Lang stepped down, the press surged forward. Claire Renner smiled as she gestured to Emily. "Emily, would you like to say a few words?" Mr. Harris touched her arm gently. "You don't have to." But Emily stood. She walked to the podium, not with nervousness but with purpose. She looked out at the crowd, then back at the engine. "My name is Emily Miller." She began, her voice clear and even. "I'm 14. I love machines. I love the way they hum when they're happy." The room chuckled softly. "And I love my dad. Jacob Miller. He worked here once. He built engines, too. A few heads turned. He never got credit for the design he spent years perfecting. He was fired before he could finish, and then he died trying to prove it mattered." Now the silence was deep. Emily pulled the notebook from her backpack and placed it on the podium. "This is his. It contains the original blueprint for what you now call the Helix One. Dated, signed, documented. I have copies. I've uploaded it all. I'm not here for a spotlight. I'm here so no one forgets the name Jacob Miller again." She stepped back. No applause. Just silence. And in that silence, Victor Lang, once towering, once invincible, sat frozen. His face pale. His empire trembling. The truth had entered the room, and it spoke with a 14-year-old girl's voice. The press conference had ended in stunned silence, but the tremor Emily set off didn't stop there. It rippled outward like a dropped wrench in a still garage. That evening, her name began appearing in quiet headlines. Teen girl sparks, patent controversy at NovaVolt event, who was? Jacob Miller forgotten mechanic at center of dispute. NovaVolt CEO refuses to comment after public challenge. The stories were cautious, careful to use words like alleged and claims, but the momentum was building. The truth, once buried under silence and shame, had found a crack in the surface. Emily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, laptop, open email inbox pulsing with new messages, journalists, bloggers, strangers writing to say, "I believe you others just saying, thank you for standing up." Her mother stood behind her arms, folded equal parts, protective and proud. Mr. Harris called just after dinner. His voice was lower, serious. "They're not going to stay quiet for long," he said. "What you did today, that wasn't just brave. It was dangerous." Emily frowned. "Dangerous how NovaVolt's legal team will be scrambling right now. They know they can't silence you publicly, so they might try to discredit you, undermine the evidence, twist the narrative." Emily's hands tightened around her phone. "But I showed them the patent draft, and they'll try to claim it was never filed, that it doesn't count, that it could have been fabricated." Her chest ached. "It was real. I know it is. But truth in a courtroom isn't just about what's real. It's about what you can prove." Emily looked down at the notebook beside her. "Then I'll prove it." There was a pause on the line. "There's one more thing," Mr. Harris said. "Tomorrow morning, NovaVolt's board of directors is convening a closed-door meeting. Word is they're going to address the situation, but not on camera." Emily's breath caught. "You think they'll bury it? I think they'll try to control it. But there's one thing they're not expecting. What you." The next day, Emily stood once again in the gleaming glass lobby of NovaVolt headquarters. The marble floor shimmered beneath her worn sneakers. She didn't have an invitation this time. Just courage. And the notebook. Claire Renner appeared moments later, flanked by 2 security staff. Her expression was cooler than before, the corporate warmth stripped away. "Emily," she said smoothly, "I'm afraid the board meeting is private. Only executive personnel and shareholders." Emily held her gaze. "I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here to request 10 minutes. Claire blinked, mildly amused. And why would the board grant 10 minutes to a teenage girl with no stake in the company? I do have a stake, Emily replied. Your entire flagship engine is based on my father's design. That makes me an heir, a witness, and if you won't listen in that room, I'll make sure the whole world listens outside it. Claire's lips thinned, but she didn't respond right away. Emily knew what was happening: calculation, risk assessment, optics. The PR director was mentally playing chess, but Emily had just flipped the board. Claire finally sighed. Wait here. She disappeared into a corridor while the two security guards stood motionless beside Emily like twin statues. Minutes dragged. Her palms sweated. Her backpack felt heavier with every passing second. Then Claire returned. You'll have 5 minutes. The boardroom was a cold, glass-paneled fortress on the top floor. A long, black table stretched like a runway through the center. At its head sat Victor Lang, his posture, rigid eyes, unreadable. Around him were a dozen men and women in suits, some curious, some irritated, all guarded. Claire gestured to the empty end of the table. You may speak. Emily stepped forward. Her heart thundered, but her voice did not tremble. My name is Emily Miller. My father, Jacob Miller, worked here for 11 years. He was fired after submitting a design proposal for an electric engine. That engine, the one you now call the Helix one, matches his original work line for line. I have documentation dated before your first internal patent, and I have a witness, Mr. Harris, who trained under him. She placed the notebook gently on the table. This is the original design. One of the board members leaned forward. Even if this notebook is authentic, it proves nothing about intent. Designs evolve. Concepts are shared. Prototypes change hands. Emily looked at him steady. Then ask yourself why this version has never been publicly acknowledged. Why his name isn't anywhere in your archives. Why his patent submission was never filed even though it was signed, stamped, and complete. Victor finally spoke. Miss Miller, these are serious accusations. If you or your guardian have legal concerns, you're welcome to contact the company through proper. I don't want to sue you, Emily cut in. That startled them. I don't want a check or a settlement or a stage. I want my father's name back. I want the truth to stop hiding in boardrooms. I want every young builder like him to know that what they create can't be stolen just because they're not wearing a suit. Victor leaned back slowly. That's a noble sentiment. But the world doesn't run on sentiment. It runs on systems. Emily looked him in the eye. Then maybe your system needs fixing. She picked up the notebook. You have a choice. You can be the company that buries its past, or you can be the one that honors it. She turned without waiting for permission and walked out of the room. Outside, the clouds were breaking. Sunlight spilled through the atrium windows, warming the marble floor. Mr. Harris was waiting near the exit. How did it go? Emily didn't smile. I said what needed to be said. He nodded, slowly, his eyes proud. Sometimes that's the hardest part. They stepped out into the crisp morning air. Behind them, a boardroom sat silent. A notebook lay heavy on a table. And in the sky above, perhaps only Emily noticed, it almost sounded like something was humming again. Victor Lang's office was dark when he entered it later that afternoon. The glass windows tinted against the early autumn sun. The blinds had been drawn. He stood there a moment, hands on his hips, looking down at the city from his 35th floor perch, unmoving. On the polished table behind him sat Jacob Miller's notebook, now closed, its leather cover scarred with time and fingerprints. For the first time in years, Victor felt something unusual creeping beneath the armor of his tailored suit uncertainty. He had built an empire on certainty. Certainty of numbers. Certainty of silence. Certainty that no one would ever connect the Helix One to a fired mechanic with grease under his nails and no college degree. And yet, here they were. Downstairs in the media lounge of the NovaVolt campus, the aftershock of Emily's confrontation was beginning to spread. Several board members had left the conference without comment. Others had stopped to exchange whispers in corners, eyes darting expressions unreadable. In a far-off corner, an older man in a dark gray jacket stood watching the news stream on a mounted television. He had silver in his beard and weariness in his shoulders. The broadcast showed Emily's speech now clipped and circulated the words glowing across the ticker tape. "I want my father's name back." He hadn't heard that name Jacob Miller in over a decade. The man adjusted his badge, Daniel Kessler, Senior Systems Engineer. He remembered Jacob, not just as a colleague, as a friend. Emily sat on the bench outside the building, arms wrapped around her knees, her backpack beside her. The air was sharp with the smell of concrete metal and early October leaves. It had all happened so fast, too fast. Inside the board was likely shredding reports, crafting press releases, consulting lawyers. But out here the world moved slower. The wind carried her thoughts further than she wanted them to go. Mr. Harris sat beside her. He hadn't said a word since she'd come out of the boardroom. Now, finally, he cleared his throat. "You were brave in there," he said. Emily stared at the ground. "Was I foolish too?" "No." He looked forward, voice thoughtful. "But you might be underestimated, and sometimes that's the best position to be in." She turned her head slowly. "They won't just admit it, will they?" "No. Not until they're forced to." Emily reached into her bag, took out the flash drive, and turned it in her fingers. "Then we make it impossible for them not to." Mr. Harris looked down at her hand. "I've been thinking. There's someone else who might be able to help us. Someone who worked on the diagnostic side during your dad's time." "Would they talk?" He shrugged. "I don't know, but I can find out." She nodded, tucking the flash drive back into her locket. Inside the building, the glass doors parted with a mechanical sigh. Out walked Claire Renner, still composed but with an edge of something she hadn't worn yesterday, respect. She approached Emily with the measured steps of a diplomat. "Miss Miller," she said, "Mr. Lang has requested a private discussion." Emily stood. "Is that supposed to be an apology or a threat?" Claire's lips pressed together. "Neither. He wants to talk off the record." Emily glanced at Mr. Harris. Claire added, "You can bring your teacher. One witness, but no press, no cameras." After a moment's silence, Emily nodded. "Fine, let's talk." Victor's office was colder than it should have been. Or maybe it was the atmosphere, the stillness of a man cornered but too proud to show it. Victor stood behind his desk, his back to the city again. "Please sit," he said over his shoulder. Emily remained standing. So did Mr. Harris. Victor finally turned. He looked older than before, or perhaps for the first time he just looked real. No stage lights, no applause, no armor. "I won't pretend I didn't know your father," he said quietly. He was difficult, passionate, stubborn, brilliant. He didn't always play by the rules, because the rules were built to keep people like him out, Emily said. Victor raised his eyebrows but didn't deny it. "I didn't steal from him, Emily," he said, "but I also didn't stop others who did." Emily's chest tightened. "You let them erase him." "I let the machine move forward," Victor said, gesturing vaguely toward the skyline. "I told myself innovation mattered more than recognition. I told myself no one would remember the name of a mechanic anyway." "You were wrong," she said softly. Victor's jaw worked. For a moment, silence passed like a slow wind. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a slim folder. He slid it across the desk. "Internal memo chain. Dated April 2015. It shows the transition from your father's prototype to the corporate design phase. His name was on the first 3 drafts, then it wasn't." Emily opened the folder slowly. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a map of what had happened. A paper trail. Something tangible. Victor sat down, hands folded. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can take it to the board. Make it right." "Do it," Emily said, standing tall, "because if you don't, I will." Victor looked up at her, not with power, but with something closer to surrender. "You really are your father's daughter." Emily turned to leave the folder in her hand, her steps firm. Mr. Harris followed. At the door, she paused just once and looked back. "You didn't just steal an engine," she said. "You stole his silence. But not anymore." The door clicked shut behind her. Victor Lang remained seated, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, and for the first time in his career he couldn't see a way forward that didn't start with going back. It was well past midnight when Emily sat down at the kitchen table, the house dark except for the soft golden glow of the overhead light. Her mother had gone to bed hours ago, but Emily couldn't sleep. Not with the folder still open in front of her, not with her father's name printed in black ink on internal memos, then crossed out line by line like it had never been there. She ran her fingers slowly over the dates. The paper was cool to the touch, but her chest burned. Every line was a quiet betrayal, every signature a nail in the silence they'd built over her father's grave. And now it was hers to undo. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Harris just heard back from the contact. He's willing to talk. Emily's thumbs hovered above the screen. Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. His name's Daniel Kessler. He says he remembers everything. Emily exhaled, her shoulders slumping with a strange mix of hope and dread. She closed the folder gently and sat back in her chair. There was still so much she didn't know. So much she needed to understand why her father never sent the patent who made the decision to erase his name and how they'd buried it so completely. But tomorrow maybe she'd get answers. And maybe they'd hurt. Daniel Kessler's home was nothing like Novavolt. It was a modest, single-story ranch in the outskirts of town with a cracked driveway and a yellowing mailbox that read Kessler in peeling letters. A small garden sat half-tended near the porch, and a wind chime clinked faintly in the morning breeze. Mr. Harris knocked twice. Emily stood beside him, the folder tucked under her arm. The door creaked open. Daniel Kessler looked older in person than he had in his ID photo. His beard now fully silver, his hands calloused and his eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "You're Jacob's girl," he said, not as a question, but a fact. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." He opened the door wider. "Come in." They stepped inside. The living room was cluttered with old radio circuit boards and shelves lined with engineering manuals. Kessler waved toward the couch. "Didn't expect to ever talk about this again," he said, settling into a faded recliner. "But I saw your speech. Brave thing you did." Emily met his eyes. "I need to know what happened. All of it." Kessler nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell you." He began with 2015. Your dad was working on a self-stabilizing loop, something no one at Novavolt had pulled off yet. He called it active hum mitigation. Most of us thought it was theoretical. Then one day he brought in this crude prototype made from scrap and duct tape. It worked, ran clean, low vibration, whisper quiet. He paused, smiling faintly. I remember the first time I heard it run. We all stood around like he'd summoned a ghost. Emily listened intently, barely blinking. Kessler's face darkened. Problem was, Jacob didn't file it through the usual channels. He hated red tape. He was scared someone would steal it before it was protected, so he kept most of the data off the network. Hand-delivered copies only. One of those copies ended up with Victor Lang. Emily's jaw tightened. Lang said he didn't steal it. Kessler chuckled grimly. Maybe not directly, but he let others do it for him. He leaned forward. There was a young engineer, then Riley Finn. Bright, ambitious, but cold. She was put on a review team after Jacob was suspended for breaking internal policy. Next thing we knew, her name showed up on early design drafts. Then the project got fast-tracked. Jacob's name was gone. Suspended, Emily repeated. They never said he was suspended. They wouldn't have. It was unofficial. They told him to take a week to think about next steps. But we all knew what that meant. Emily swallowed the rising heat in her throat. And the patent draft. He never sent it. Kessler nodded. He wanted to. Had it in his hand one day. Told me he was going to drop it off at the post office. But that night someone from HR met him in the parking lot. told him it would violate his severance agreement and open him up to litigation. Mr. Harris leaned forward, so they scared him into silence. Scared, manipulated, maybe both. He was proud, but he was exhausted, and he had a daughter to feed. Emily looked down at her hands. "He never told me any of that," she whispered. Kessler's voice softened. "He was trying to protect you. That's the kind of man he was." She knotted her throat tight. "There's one more thing," Kessler said, rising from his chair. He walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a dusty USB drive. "I kept this. It's from the diagnostic server Jacob used, before they wiped his account. Has system log simulation timestamps a video file too, him testing the prototype. Might be the only footage left." Emily stood stunned. "Why didn't you come forward?" Kessler met her eyes. "Because no one was listening. But now, someone is." He pressed the drive into her hand. "I owed him more than silence." Back home, Emily plugged the USB into her laptop. The folder opened with a soft chime revealing dozens of files but only one video. She clicked play. The screen flickered. Her father appeared, young, tired, smiling. His hands were blackened with oil. Behind him in the garage, the prototype engine rested on a wooden table. He looked at the camera. Test number 12. Active mitigation loop adjusted. "Emily, if you're watching this someday, yes, I see you sneaking into the garage. This is the one that hums the way you like. The one that purrs instead of roars." He winked. Then he hit the switch. The engine came alive. It wasn't loud. It didn't shake. It sang. And Emily, in her quiet bedroom in 2025, began to cry, not from sadness but from something deeper. Validation. He hadn't imagined it. He hadn't failed. He had built something real. And now, so would she. She wiped her face, opened her email, and attached the video. Then the folder of logs. Then the scans of the patent draft. Then the memo from Victor Lang. She addressed it to 3 people, the USPTNO, a national investigative journalist who had written her that morning, and NovaVolt's board of directors. Subject line, "What you buried." Then she hit send. Emily didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. She sat at her desk in the silence, her eyes burning from the screen's glow, her heart pounding with something that felt halfway between terror and purpose. The video of her father ran on loop in her mind, his crooked grin, his soot-streaked hands, the gentle pride in his voice when he spoke to the camera, and the unmistakable hum of the engine. She had sent it to the world. Now she waited for the world to listen. At 6:42 a.m., her inbox chimed. Subject, What You Buried, from Nora Bain. Independent investigative journalist Emily, this is extraordinary. I verified the file timestamps and cross-checked the names in your documents. I'm reaching out to former NovaVolt employees. Please call me when you're able. I believe your story could go national. Emily reread the message 3 times before her shaking fingers dialed the number at the bottom. Emily Miller, the woman's voice was crisp but kind. Yes, thank you for answering so quickly. I should be thanking you, Nora said. You may have just unraveled the most significant buried IP theft case I've seen in a decade. They spoke for 20 minutes, Nora asking questions with the surgical precision of someone who had seen too many lies and was trained to spot the shape of truth. She promised to protect Emily's identity where possible, but warned that NovaVolt's lawyers wouldn't play fair once the story broke. I don't want to be anonymous, Emily said. I want them to say his name. Nora's pause on the line was brief but meaningful. Then we'll say it loud. By mid-afternoon, the first wave hit. A blog post on TechTrue titled, A Mechanic's Ghost, Did NovaVolt Build Its Fortune on Stolen Genius? Within hours, The Verge Wired and GadgetByte had picked it up, adding their own layers of commentary. Screenshots of Jacob Miller's patent draft video clips from the USB drive and stills from Emily's confrontation on stage now filled every corner of the internet. Justice. For Jacob began trending on social media. At school, Emily sat in the back of her English class as notifications buzzed in her pocket like a second heartbeat. Her classmates whispered and glanced her way, some with wide eyes, some with cautious respect. Even the teacher paused awkwardly during roll call before clearing his throat and continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. That evening, as golden light spilled into the kitchen, Emily watched her mother stare at the television. A news anchor stood in front of NovaVolt's headquarters reading aloud a statement from the company. NovaVolt is aware of the allegations regarding the Helix 1 design. We take matters of intellectual property and legacy seriously and are conducting an internal review. Internal review, her mother muttered. Translation, they're panicking. Emily sat down slowly. They're trying to stay ahead of it. Her mother turned to her eyes, soft and shining with something deeper than pride relief. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. Not yet, Emily said. But they're listening now. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. He'd be so proud of you, Emily. So proud. Emily couldn't speak. She just nodded, the lump in her throat too heavy. The next morning, Emily found herself outside NovaVolt once more, this time not as a guest, but as a symbol. A crowd had gathered along the sidewalk. Protesters held signs reading, "Say his name, Jacob Miller, and innovation isn't theft." Reporters lined the block, cameras pointed at the building's entrance like hunters at the mouth of a cave. Mr. Harris stood beside her, adjusting his tie nervously. "This is bigger than any of us now," he said. "And you lit the match." Claire Renner emerged from the building at 9 a.m. sharp. Her posture was rigid, her expression unreadable. She approached Emily with the cautious formality of someone trained in fire containment. "The board has called for an emergency session," Claire said. "Your name will be discussed, as will your father's." Emily nodded. "I'm not here to ask anymore. I'm here to make sure they do what's right." Claire glanced at the crowd. "You've made it. Difficult not to." Inside the boardroom buzzed with hushed conversations and tense glances. Victor Lang sat at the head of the table, noticeably paler than before. This time, Emily wasn't invited to speak. She didn't need to. The evidence had spoken for her. In a glass-walled side room, she and Mr. Harris waited with Claire. A flat screen mounted on the wall streamed live financial data. NovaVolt's stock, for the first time in months, was dipping. Claire broke the silence. "I've been in corporate PR for 17 years, she said. "We've dealt with supply chain scandals, tech failures, a battery fire lawsuit, but nothing hits the public like a buried conscience." Emily didn't look away. It shouldn't have taken a child to uncover it. "No," Claire agreed quietly, "but sometimes it takes someone who doesn't know what can't be done." The board meeting ran long. Too long. Emily paced. Her hands trembled. She replayed the video in her mind again and again, her father's face, his voice, the pride in every line. She remembered sitting in his lap while he sketched engine parts on napkins, remembered how he taught her that everything mechanical had a rhythm, and that once you heard it, you could fix anything. Even injustice. The door finally opened. Victor Lang emerged, no longer the man from magazine covers. He looked smaller somehow. Less like a CEO and more like a man who'd spent years trying not to look in the mirror. "We've reached a decision," he said, voice flat. Emily stood still, her shoulders squared. Victor nodded toward Claire, who handed Emily a printed document. She read it, heart-thudding. NovaVolt would formally acknowledge Jacob Miller as a founding contributor to the Helix 1's core design. His name would be added to all future patent disclosures, technical archives, and public materials. Her breath hitched. A separate paragraph stated that NovaVolt would fund a scholarship in Jacob Miller's name for underrepresented youth in mechanical engineering. No legal battle, no denial, just truth. Emily blinked back tears. "Thank you." Victor met her gaze, weary but honest. "No. Thank you." He turned to go, but paused. "He was one of the best we ever had. We just didn't see it in time." Emily whispered, "You're not the only one who lost time. Outside, the crowd erupted when the news broke. Emily stood beneath the morning sun, her father's notebook clutched tight in her arms as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. But she wasn't there for them. She closed her eyes, tilted her face toward the light, and whispered one name into the wind. Dad. And for the first time in 10 years, it felt like the hum of his engine wasn't buried anymore. It was everywhere. The hearing room inside the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office building in D.C. was nothing like the gleaming NovaVolt Tower or the shadowed intimacy of her father's garage. It was fluorescent lit, cold, bureaucratic. The kind of place where truth was supposed to live on paper and in procedure, not in people's hearts. Emily sat between her mother and Mr. Harris, both dressed simply but neatly. Her own palms were damp inside the sleeves of her navy cardigan. In front of them sat a narrow table with a small microphone, and beside it a worn leather notebook laid gently like something sacred. To her left were NovaVolt's lawyers, crisp suits, thick files, unreadable expressions. But no Victor Lang. He hadn't come. Perhaps that was his final decision as CEO resigned the day before the hearing, a quiet exit from the storm he helped create. A woman in her 50s with clear eyes and a silver bob sat at the center of the tribunal. She adjusted her glasses and glanced over the assembled crowd. This is an evidentiary hearing regarding patent dispute filing E-PN in 38674, she began, voice precise. It pertains to the alleged origination and misattribution of technical components within the NovaVolt Helix 1 powertrain system. Her gaze shifted toward Emily. Miss Miller, are you prepared to present your statement? Emily stood. For a moment, she just breathed. Then she stepped forward. My name is Emily Miller, she said, voice clear but soft. I'm 14. My father was Jacob Miller. He worked as a mechanic and technician at NovaVolt between 2004 and 2015. He wasn't famous. He didn't have a degree, but he was brilliant. And the Helix 1, the thing that's powered headlines and profits and promises, is built on his hands, his mind, and his silence. One of the patent officials leaned forward. Do you have direct evidence of authorship? Emily nodded. Yes, ma'am. She opened the folder Mr. Harris had helped her organize, dated blueprints, simulation logs, diagnostic readouts, the unsent patent draft, all now notarized. Then, with reverence, she placed a printed transcript of her father's video testimony on top of the pile. Every page tells the same story, she said. He created the loop stabilization system in our garage, and it was taken. His name removed, his work buried, all because he wasn't the right face for innovation. The woman at the center raised a brow. And what are you requesting here today, Miss Miller? Emily looked down for a beat, then back up. I'm not here to sue. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for the truth to be part of the record. I'm asking you to recognize Jacob Miller as the original contributor to the core design of the Helix 1. That's all. That's everything. A quiet settled over the room like dust. Then the chairwoman turned to the NovaVolt side. A man in a slate-gray suit stood. NovaVolt does not contest the originality of the designs presented. The current board of directors has accepted Ms. Miller's evidence, and we are in agreement that Jacob Miller's authorship should be formally recognized under U.S. patent law as a co-inventor. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Emily's knees almost buckled. Her mother reached over, gripping her hand tightly. The lead official nodded solemnly. Then this panel formally recommends the amendment of Patent No. 1224-3 to include Jacob Miller as co-inventor of the loop stabilization system now powering the Helix 1 engine. This recommendation will be submitted for record with immediate effect. It was done. In a room of papers and protocols, her father's name had finally been written back into history. They exited into a cloudy afternoon, the air crisp with early November. Emily felt the wind tug at her hair as if even the world wanted to say something. Reporters waited again, but fewer now, just the ones who had followed the story from the beginning. Nora Bain was among them, her notepad tucked under her arm, her eyes warmer than any lens. You did it, she said simply. No, Emily replied, glancing at her mom and Mr. Harris. We did. That evening, back in their quiet house on the edge of the town, Emily sat at the kitchen table, the old notebook in her lap. The front cover was soft now, the leather cracked along the spine, the corners dog-eared from years of hope and hiding. But it was whole. And so, for the first time, was she. Her mother came over with 2 mugs of cocoa and set one beside her. You know, she said when he started sketching that engine, I thought it was just another of his impossible dreams, something he'd tinker with and never finish. Emily looked up. He didn't finish it? No, her mother said, but you did. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. A hum rose faintly in the distance, just a neighbor's old engine, probably. But to Emily, it sounded like a song. Her mom reached into her pocket and pulled something out. It was the small wrench Emily had placed in her father's casket all those years ago. Her mother smiled faintly. I couldn't let them bury this, too. Emily took it slowly, her hands curling around the cool metal. It's his. No, her mother said. It's yours now. Later that night, Emily logged onto her email and opened a new message. The subject line read, "To every kid who builds in silence." She typed, "My name is Emily Miller. My dad didn't have a fancy lab or a title. He built things with his hands, his heart, and his time. When the world told him he wasn't enough, he believed them. But I didn't. If you're a kid building engines out of junk or sketching blueprints on the backs of homework, keep going. Because the truth has a hum. And when it's finally heard, it changes everything." She hit publish. And with that, the last bolt of her father's story was finally in place. It began not with fanfare, but with an envelope. Thin, cream-colored, embossed with the official seal of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It arrived at the Miller household 3 weeks after the hearing nestled between utility bills and seasonal catalogs. Emily's mother nearly missed it tucked beneath an advertisement for winter tires. But Emily knew the moment she saw it, this was the one. She slid it open with shaking hands and pulled out the single-page certification. Her eyes scanned each line until they landed on the words that changed everything. Amended patent, Hetork 1.224/3, officially recognizes Jacob Michael Miller as co-inventor of the Helix 1 active loop stabilization system as of November 14, 2025. For a moment, she could only stare. Then she pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. He was there. Not in some imagined way, but in ink, in law, in history. The announcement broke across the media later that day. Unlike the early speculation and cautious headlines this time, the tone had changed. Mechanic's name, restored in landmark patent case. The New York Times. The engine that hummed Jacob Miller's design. Recognized. After a decade, NPR Teens Courage rewrites tech history. Vox Nova Volt issued a formal statement posted publicly and read aloud by their interim CEO. We honor the innovation and contributions of Jacob Miller, whose vision helped shape the future of clean engine technology. We also recognize the strength and determination of his daughter, Emily Miller, without whom this truth might never have come to light. NovaVolt is committed to ensuring the integrity of all inventor recognition moving forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And it was public. A week later, Emily and her mother were invited to a dedication ceremony at NovaVolt headquarters. Mr. Harris came too beaming in a newly pressed blazer that looked at least a decade old, but well loved. The event was quiet, no stage lights or ticker tape. Just a plaque installed in the main engineering hall affixed beside the Helix 1 display. Emily read it in silence. In memory of Jacob Miller, co-inventor, mechanic, father. His hands built what others could only imagine. His silence was a loss. His voice now lives on. A hum filled her ears, soft, subtle. She realized it was the engine running behind the glass panel, polished, refined, gleaming with promise, but she no longer saw a product. She saw him. Her mother reached for her hand. He would have hated all this attention. Emily smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. But he would have loved that they finally listened. That night back home, Emily received an unexpected email. It was from the Dean of the National Institute of Mechanical Science. Emily, we'd like to formally offer you the inaugural Jacob M. Miller Memorial Scholarship for Youth Innovation in Engineering. Full tuition. Your father inspired more than a system, he inspired a generation. And you've sparked something even larger. We hope you'll consider joining us. P.S. We'd also like to include your notebook in our National Engineering Archive if you're ready to share it. Warm regards, Dr. Samantha. Lee Emily stared at the screen for a long time. Then she opened the top drawer of her desk and looked at the old notebook still thick with pencil dust and grease smudges and fingerprints from a man who never got to finish what he started. She placed her hand gently on the cover. "It's time, Dad." She wrote back with a single line, "Yes. Let's build something new together." In the following months, Emily continued to receive letters, not from executives or lawyers, but from kids. One from a boy in Ohio who built an electric go-kart from salvaged toaster parts. Another from a girl in Montana who'd designed a solar water heater for her barn animals. They all said the same thing in different ways. I didn't think people like us could matter. Now I do. Emily responded to each one. Because they did matter. Her father had mattered. And that truth, once hidden in the dust of a forgotten garage, was now part of the world's story. At the edge of town, just beyond the rusting water tower and the railroad tracks, sat Jacob Miller's old garage. It had remained untouched for years until now. Emily stood outside, a key in her hand, a small sign propped against the door. The Miller Workshop for Young Builders, where every hum is heard. Inside, she'd cleared the space. She'd painted the walls. She'd added workbenches, toolkits, second-hand computers, and a whiteboard with the word "Why" written in permanent marker across the top. Mr. Harris agreed to volunteer as the first instructor. Her mom baked cookies every weekend for the kids, and Emily, still only 14, taught her first class the day before winter break. She wore her dad's old work apron rolled up at the waist to fit. 10 students aged 9 to 15 sat waiting. She picked up a small engine core and held it in both hands. This, she began. Looks like a machine, but it's also a message. Someone imagined this before it ever existed, and if they can do that, so can you. A boy in the front raised his hand. "Do we need to be smart?" "You need to be curious," she said, smiling. "Smart comes after." A girl in the back asked, "What if we mess up?" Emily thought for a moment. Then she knelt beside the workbench, placed the engine down, and looked each of them in the eye. "My dad once said something breaks because it's trying to be heard," she said. "So if something goes wrong, just listen closer." And with that, they began. Wires, sparks, laughter, mistakes, fixes, hope. The garage came alive again, not with ghosts, but with beginnings. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the next generation hummed. It was just after dusk when Emily flipped the switch and lit the single overhead bulb in the garage. The space glowed with soft amber light, warmer than fluorescent, quieter than LED, casting gentle shadows along the workbenches and shelves. Outside, the sky was the color of slate, speckled with stars beginning to blink into view. She stood for a moment at the threshold, letting the hum of the past settle around her. The hum her father once taught her to listen for, not just in engines, but in people, in ideas, in moments that mattered. Behind her, the garage door stood open to the chilly night. A boy named Mason, only 11, and already fascinated by torque curves, wheeled in a wagon holding a rusted lawnmower engine. A girl named Priya followed with a bin full of salvaged wires and broken fan motors. "Do we sort these by color or length?" she asked. Emily smiled. "Neither. Sort them by possibility." The kids chuckled, already used to her way of answering questions like riddles. But they obeyed, and within moments the room came to life, not loud or chaotic, but with the gentle electricity of concentration. Mr. Harris arrived late, carrying a box of old textbooks and a large thermos of cocoa. "They're getting faster," he noted as he placed the books on the shelf. "They're getting braver," Emily replied, watching Mason pull out a wrench with absolute focus. Her mother stood in the doorway, coat pulled tight, sipping from a mug. "It smells like your dad's workshop used to," she said. Emily nodded. "Feels like it, too." There was something poetic about the way it all had come full circle. This space, once silent, once filled with shadows and half-finished dreams, was now a crucible of small revolutions, of questions, of discovery, and of hope. In the far corner of the garage sat a glass case. Inside was the prototype core, the very same her father had built years ago, restored and cleaned but left untouched in its essence. Next to it sat the worn leather notebook open to page 47, and a small brass plaque, Jacob M. Miller, 1976-2017, builder, dreamer, father. The hum you hear began here. People came sometimes, strangers, engineers, parents. They'd stand in front of that case and stare quietly. Some left letters, others left tools. But Emily didn't need the display to remember. He was everywhere in this place. In the socket wrenches lined up on the wall like soldiers, in the smell of grease and graphite, in the chalkboard at the back where she'd written his old saying, "If it's broken, it's just trying to speak." Later that evening, after the last student had gone home, Emily sat alone on the step of the garage, legs drawn to her chest, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. The world had moved on since the hearing. Nova Volt had replaced its leadership-issued scholarships and even launched a new initiative promoting garage-born innovation. The media cycle had spun away chasing fresher stories. But for Emily, the journey hadn't ended in a courtroom or a headline. It ended here, with a quiet garage, with kids who didn't know they weren't supposed to be inventors, with her father's voice still echoing between the rafters. Mr. Harris came out a few minutes later, a coat draped over his arm. "You've built something real here," he said. Emily looked up. So did he. "I just finished it." He chuckled, then sat beside her. "I was thinking," he said, "after a while maybe we host an open workshop next spring. Bring in mentors, other builders. Maybe even name it something." Emily thought for a moment. Then her lips curved. "Let's call it the Hum Project." He nodded slowly. "That sounds just right." A soft breeze stirred the trees. Inside, the last light of the garage flickered faintly, casting long golden beams across the concrete floor. It shimmered on the metal, warmed the case that held her father's legacy, and wrapped itself gently around Emily's shoulders. She closed her eyes and listened. Not for applause, not for noise, but for the hum. The same hum she'd once heard as a child, sitting on a crate in a cold garage while her father explained voltage like it was magic. The hum that told her something real was alive, something true. She smiled. It was still here, still singing. And in the warmth of that sound, Emily understood something she hadn't before. Her father hadn't just built an engine. He had built a bridge, between generations, between silence and truth, between dreaming and doing. And now, under the soft glow of a single garage light, that bridge was open to anyone brave enough to cross it. Where are you watching from? We love hearing from viewers all over the world, so drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or simply made you think, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this storytelling journey. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and take care.